Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK-12 team, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, all about CK-12's adaptive practice. Before I introduce you to today's presenter, I'd like to go over a few logistics about the Zoom webinar platform. You should see two different options on your Zoom screen, one for Q&A and one for chat. During our presentation, whenever you have a question about CK-12 or adaptive practice, please post them in the Q&A window. We will pause for a Q&A session after each major topic to address any questions that have been submitted. The chat window is a place for a community conversation. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, feel free to share your state, district, or subject you teach. Just make sure in the chat window that you are sending any general posts to everyone and not just to CK-12 or the panelists. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you're having any trouble with your video or your sound, please let us know in Q&A or the chat window. Now that we've gone over the logistics for this webinar, let me introduce you to the CK-12 Foundation and then to our presenter. The CK-12 Foundation, founded in 2007, is a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to improving student learning by increasing access to educational materials through the Flexbook platform and concept-based modalities. CK-12 offers free, high-quality, standards-aligned, open content through an integrated set of tools for learning, including digital textbooks, concept-based learning resources, simulations, interactive practice, and more. And we give it all away for free. Our core content and curriculum is for middle school and high school math and science, with some K-5 math practice and videos. However, with the addition of donated resources and user-created content, you'll also be able to find books for other subjects and levels, especially related to social studies and English. A lot of people are surprised to find out that this website is run by a small team of about 35 people in Palo Alto, California, with a few colleagues working outside of our California office and our India office. We are some of the most passionate people that you'll ever meet. We love what we do and are thrilled to give people all over the world access to quality content and resources. One of these passionate educators is Katie Hammond. Katie is an experienced classroom teacher and a CK-12 math specialist who will tell you everything you need to know about adaptive practice while pausing periodically to answer any questions you might have. So at this time, I would like to welcome Katie.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. In this webinar, I'll be covering the following topics: CK-12's adaptive practice system, customizing practice in CK-12 quizzes, and tracking student progress. For each of these areas, practice, quizzes, and student reports, I will describe the what, why, where. What it is, why you should use it, and where you can access it, and then go into the tool itself so you can see it in action. My main goal is that by the end of this session, you feel excited and equipped to use CK-12 practice quizzes and reports with your class. But before we get into the core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will prompt you to respond to two questions. The first question is to get an idea of how familiar you are with our practice tool. This will tell us how in-depth we should go into our tools in this webinar. So please let us know if you are familiar, have used, or have even customized CK-12 practice before today. The second question is regarding learning management systems and other tools you may be using in your schools and districts. Please let us know if you are using any of the following: Blackboard, Canvas, Edmodo, Google Classroom, Schoology, some other LMS, or that you're not using an LMS. You're allowed to select more than one LMS when answering this poll. And if your school or district is using one that isn't listed, please choose other and let us know in the chat window the name of the system you are using. I'll pause for a few seconds to let you finish answering this poll. Great. Lindsay will review those answers and help direct this conversation based on some of your responses. Thank you so much. And so let's move on to the core content for this week. You can get to any of our content and tools by going to the CK-12 homepage using the web address www.ck12.org. As you can see on the homepage, we offer a number of options to access our content. You can jump straight into our interactive simulations or PLICs, our practice concept map, or materials that schools have published on our site. You can search for any content using our search bar, either on the homepage or from the top of other pages on our site. Below that, if you scroll down, is the links for our major branches of content. These include topics for math and science, such as arithmetic or chemistry, as well as some other donated content. Now, if we looked at physics as an example branch, you can see two tabs, concepts and flexbooks. Many people know us as a flexbook company, and you can find those free customizable textbooks on that tab. However, we have moved beyond textbooks to include concept-based learning. All the resources for that, which include various modalities to help students learn in different ways, can be found in the initial concepts tab. If we continue to scroll through this content, we can look at any concept, which would give us those different modalities. And then let's say we were teaching on the law of reflection. If we continue to scroll down, we could find that particular topic and go into that concept page. Here you'll see our featured content and resources, which include text, videos, practice, interactive simulations, and PLICs. These aim to allow students to explore and learn a topic through these different modalities and help them understand in different ways. To use all of these resources, all we ask is that you quickly join or sign in if you're new. Join if you're new or sign in. You can do this in seconds using Google, Facebook, or your own email address. This allows us to keep all of your work in one place in our system while you get full access to all that CK-12 offers for free. As you saw when we looked at the physics concept, there are a number of different ways to learn on CK-12, including our core modalities of text, which we call reads, simulations, currently for physics, our interactive PLICs, videos, practice, and even real-world applications. Today, we're focusing on practice, so let's begin by exploring that. So what is practice? CK-12's adaptive practice system is a digital tool designed to meet students at their current level of understanding and help them master the next step for any concept. Because of that, our system will bump students up to available harder questions if they are successfully answering, or it will make recommendations such as text to read, a video to watch, or an interactive to work with. Now, why should you use it? There are 150,000 plus questions in our database that include math, science, and spelling questions. There are a variety of question types from multiple choice, select all, true, false, short answer, and our newest ones, a fill in the blank, drag and drop into categories, and highlighting. When students complete work and click submit, they will be able to see information such as the time they spent, their streak, and the number of easy, medium, and hard questions they completed. Note that because our adaptive practice system meets students where they are, a student who is struggling may hit the goal of 10 correct with all easier questions, and a student who is more advanced would have more of a mix of levels. Where can you find this? This tool provides the ability for students to practice at their own pace, and you can access that on the website or on the free CK-12 app, which is available for smartphones and tablets. Therefore, students can practice on a computer in school or at home, or on the bus on the way to a game. So at this point, you probably want to see how this works on our site. So let's switch over, and instead of showing you this presentation, I'm going to share my screen and share CK-12 so we can go into this practice itself. So I'm a teacher logged in, but if I was a student, I could go in as well and find content in the same way. Now, the first option for students is to click on the adaptive practice thing, our little icon there, and then to pick a topic, let's say measurement, and go into that particular concept and start practicing from there. The other option would be to go back to the home page. And if you go back to that home page, I could go into any particular concept. So let's say I wanted to talk about numerical expression evaluation if I was in algebra. I could search that from the top up here, or I could go into algebra and then scroll down until I hit numerical expression evaluation. From here, I can click into the practice and it will open the practice modality. Students will have that same option that you're seeing here as a teacher, but instead of preview, they'll have the option to practice directly there. As a teacher, you can see this assign to class option in the top left, and that's your quick assign option, which is available for both practice as well as some of our other modalities, such as reads, videos, and different simulations and interactives. Now, you could also create practice or an assignment from within the groups feature, but we'll save that for later in today's webinar. So let's go into this concept and see what it looks like. Within the concept itself, you'll see a number of options. You'll see the question. You'll see options for hints. So a student who might be struggling and needs a little help remembering, oh, I need to do this in terms of the order of operations or take the difference, could check that hint and go from there. They could use the scratch pad if they wanted to actually write out this problem vertically instead of horizontally. And then they could type in an answer. Now, if I start randomly guessing, you'll see this meter up at the top right. Maybe a hint will pop up to help the student out. But this meter will continue to go down if I'm just throwing in super random answers and getting them incorrect. As I continue to do that, it will eventually say, hey, you're just guessing. Maybe we should probably give you a recommendation to help you understand this concept better. And in this case, it popped up some video options as well as a read that the student could go in and check out and help them learn and understand the concept better. They can go check those out and then go back to practice and continue going from there. If I was getting these correct, this meter would go up further and it would give them more time before they'd be seeing those recommendations. Additionally, if they were getting the easier questions right, then they would start seeing different pieces that were harder questions as they worked through. So just to show you what this looks like on the other end, I could say, okay, 16 minus 4, I get 12 times 3, 36, and then I get a correct answer in there. And that would help me kind of see the different pieces within a problem. Now, when a student is done, they should make sure to click submit. Students who go back will eventually kind of log in the reports, but if they're just Xing out of the browse page, the system might not have finished recording their work, and therefore you might have issues as a teacher seeing the work they've done. So I'm gonna click submit here, and it will take me to the practice details for that page. And I could go in and keep practicing if I was the student and practicing from there. I could download this worksheet as a teacher, or I could even customize it, which we'll talk about in our next section. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what our adaptive practice tool looks like as the practice tool itself. And let's pause for a minute to see if you have any questions about basic practice or assigning work to your students. So if you're not using that Q&A option, feel free to jump in with some questions. And if we don't have any right away, then we may just continue into the quiz option and that customization where some of those questions might kind of show up a little more.
Yeah, so far, Katie, we're not getting just a ton of questions, so I encourage you, all of you viewers, to ask some. We can tell from the poll that we asked, thanks for contributing to that, that our users are actually pretty split today. We've got a portion who said that they are not familiar, an equal portion that said a little bit, and then a few users who've used occasionally and who have customized. So I think you're talking to kind of a mixed audience today, which is exciting. So that was kind of our first quick overview, and it looks like we've got a couple questions coming in. We have Arnie who asked, can you quickly show a science example?
Sure, I would be happy to do that. So let me X out of here for a second. And I'm gonna go back to our homepage. And if we go into, let's say, ecosystem. So I showed you how to kind of scroll into one part. I could go into here by clicking a topic at the top. And then if I was teaching in life science or biology, I could pick the matching concept and go into that practice. And so if I do that, you'll see the same deal in terms of the preview option. And we could talk here. And this is one of those fill in the blank questions that has multiple parts within a particular question. And so let's say I was just guessing and I put biotic for both of these. you'll see that the system says, hey, you got part of this right, but not the other half of this. So it will differentiate if there's multiple parts to a question that you're answering in terms of one part correct and one part not. But because the whole question wasn't correct, that wouldn't count towards the 10 the student is going for that particular system. And you'll see the difference. That was a fill in the blank. You saw some short answer ones. What are the following are crucial to maintaining the balance? Let's see if that works, and we'll go from there. So there's an example of science. Once again, you get the mix of different question types depending on where you are, and you'll see different levels as you work through there. So hopefully that answered your question for that part.
Great. Jennifer's jumped in with a couple of questions. Let's take on the first one. She's asking for some more details about the skill level, wanting to know how that works and what information does that reflect?
Sure. So the skill level is based on how the student is doing. So as you see, kind of this meter up at the top is flashing red and saying, the last one you got one incorrect, but not necessarily the other ones. I could continue to kind of answer if I was getting them wrong. It would make those recommendations. Our system is adaptive in that any available harder questions. So when we go into the reports, let me just submit this for a second and you can kind of see what that looks like. And we'll go into this a little more in detail. But right here, you'll see easy, medium, and hard questions. So I've actually worked on this topic before. So it was an easy one to pull up. And I've gotten 3 of the easy questions right by probably randomly guessing in there, 1 of the medium questions, and a couple of the hard questions. And so what the system does is as I'm doing well, instead of continually feeding me easier questions, it will bump up to those available medium and hard questions to allow the student to access those pieces. And once again, this is like within our general adaptive practice. And when we customize it, that skill level will be your choice as you're specifically selecting different questions.
Great. Jessie just asked, who authored these questions?
So we've had a number of different people kind of author our questions over time. A lot of them have come out of our texts themselves, and we have had different authors, subject matter experts, former teachers go in, and all of our textbooks are built through the same authoring process that a traditional publisher would use in terms of having someone go in and determine a scope and sequence, and then the content itself, and then go through peer review and technical edits. And so a lot of our content came from there. In other cases, we as a team who are former educators have authored questions if we thought we needed some more in a particular place, or we've worked with other organizations that have built questions to kind of help contribute to our question. So there's a lot of variety in terms of where they're coming from, but we're all going from places where we have looked at the options that we have there and incorporated them in, and then continually review and update those questions. And so there, you might have seen on kind of while I was doing that question, if I go back in here to keep practicing, this little improve this question option. So if you see any question that you say, hey, I think that maybe there's another answer that's also valid that we need to add in here, or we missed a typo in there, or something like that, because there are 150,000 plus questions, feel free to let us know, and we use that information to help update the questions within our core system. So hopefully that answers that piece of your question on where they came from.
Sure. And then the last one, I think, before we move on to the topic of quizzes, Jennifer was asking if you could show a drag and drop question.
Sure, and those are our newest question types, so we don't actually have a lot of them in our system outside of our Plix interactive piece. So why don't I hold that question until we talk about creating your own question, and I can actually build one for you so you can see what that looks like. And that might be a great way to kind of show you what that looks like and then also explain our question tool.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Why don't we switch back over here, and we're going to move on to our next section that is about quizzes. Let me pull up my screen.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. So as we continue on from here, let's talk about kind of the same thing for quizzes, the what it is, how it works, and go from there. So if you want to tailor your assignments for students, you have the option to customize CK-12 practice into a quiz, whether or not you want to use it as a quiz. So we kind of call it a quiz, but it's definitely an option to tailor an assignment And it doesn't have to be a full assessment where, you know, they're not using any other resources in there. You should note that when you do choose to customize our practice, that adaptive component is no longer incorporated into your practice. And the reason for this is that we wouldn't want to override the specifics that you determine for that quiz by jumping in with our own system. So know that if you're tailoring, you get what you choose, and that if you're using our general practice, you get the benefits of that adaptive system. So now, why should you use it? Quizzes allow you to customize and specifically choose the number of questions or even the questions themselves that you want students to complete. You can also set time limits, number of attempts, your access to hints, and the order the questions appear. Whether used as a quiz or a tailored assignment, you can address particular goals you have for that class. And then where do you get it? So quizzes can be customized on CK-12. Once assigned, students can then access them on a computer, tablet, or phone via the web, or if you've made an assignment via our practice app. So let's start by looking at a particular concept that you might want to customize. So I'm going to once again jump back to my screen by sharing that. And see if this loads. Can you see our homepage again? Nope. Let me try that one more time, because it looked for a second like it might not be sharing. Hold on one second. I'm going to have Lindsay share hers one more time, and then I'll reshare and try to load that once more.
Okay. This is the live fun here.
Okay, I think I'm good. There we go. Is that popping up now?
Yeah,
great.
like we're in business.
Okay, so let's look in physical science for a concept that you might want to customize. So if I go down from here, I can pick physical science. And then I can click on a concept in this particular topic, let's say matter, mass, and volume. So this is a great one because it could be interdisciplinary. So hopefully this addresses both math and science. So if I go into my assessment practice page, you'll see on the left this option to customize. So it'll give you a little pop-up about quizzes, and then I can go into that particular piece. So a couple of things. So this is our demo. So let's say demo for webinar on adaptive practice. And I could write a description, and that might be helpful if I wanted to remember specifics that I had put in this quiz, or if I was using variations for different classes. I can change the number of attempts. And one thing you should know about attempts is that each time a student accesses a quiz, that counts as an attempt. So if you want them to be able to go in and out of a quiz and try some stuff and then go back home and then start it over again without worrying about the number of attempts, then make sure you leave that at unlimited. If you put a restriction on that, then each time a student accesses the quiz, they're going to go in and they'll have a chance to complete the quiz in that shot before they close it up again. Anytime they access it again, they'll start from the beginning and work their way through that practice piece. So that is one difference, in that with that attempts component in there, our adaptive practice will save progress and students can keep working, but the quiz will ask you to go in and do your homework in one shot from there. And if you have questions and access it later, start again. You can set a time limit. If you set it in minutes, it's for the whole quiz, or you can leave it as unlimited. And then if you're actually using it as a quiz, you might not want to show the hints, so you could uncheck that option. Now down here, I could change the number of questions. So the goal in our adaptive practice is 10 questions correct. Here, this is the number of questions they will be served regardless of how many they get correct. And you can just click on that and change it down 10 or 11. Now, it gives me a little reminder that if I've changed anything else in there and I'm now changing it, it'll reset the other work that I've done within that particular piece. So just make sure that you're going from there. Mass, matter, and volume is a great math and science concept. So maybe I want to add some extra volume practice from math for my students. And to do that, I can click on the add a concept, and then I could just search for volume concepts and say, what do I want? Let's say maybe volume of cylinders would be a great thing to add to here. So I can click that and add any of that question options to this particular quiz. So now I have two different concepts. I could pick this and put them in a different order if I wanted to. I could change this number as well. And I could even go into the questions themselves and edit those questions. So this will load our question tool with all the different questions. So right now it had preset 20 questions. I can unselect anyone that I want. I can rearrange the order. You can see the easy, medium, and hard options on here. So that's kind of a way for you to pick and choose different variations that you might want in there. And then I could even go down to ones that weren't picked and choose those. If you wanted to see this question in action, just open it up and it will load the preview of the question for you to see. So that's kind of the different ways to add different numbers or hand select your questions. While you're in here, if you wanted to add your own question, you could click Add Question. So it's going to save that piece and open up our question tool. And let's say we're going to do that drag and drop option, but you can pick one of your other options in here if you wanted to. So to create a drag and drop, I'm basically creating different categories. And so maybe I would say something about volume, because that's the concept that this is being tagged to. So the volume of a cylinder is kind of has different components, has the following components. Or I could even say the volume of, different objects, and you could say which different pieces fall under different parts. So in this case, let me say I'm going to add a category. So let's say the category goes for cylinder. And then I might say, let's say area of the base is one, and height is another component. And then another place that I could have stuff, I could have, let's say, a pyramid. Might be, we have another area of the bottom. We'll just kind of clarify that piece. And then the height of the pyramid. And if I was going to create this, I could pick another category and I could talk about volume of a pyramid or a rectangular prism or whatever that looked like. And then I would just highlight these answers and add them into here. So now I can drag this into this particular piece. I can drag the height of this one into here and even add kind of the other components. Now, if I was going to save this and share it, let's add the last piece. I can go down to the bottom. I could, note the concept that it's currently tagged to, or I could add a new concept, and then I can submit it. And so for this particular question, when it gets submitted and added to my quiz, it's auto pre-selected to be added because we're assuming if you wrote it, you probably want to include it. And you'll find it at the bottom of the questions that you've already selected. So here's the one I just made. If I toggle down, you can see this drag and drop in action. So in this case, when we were talking about this area of the base, now, granted, you could use the area of a base for the pyramid or different pieces, but let's put them both in here. And then the height, if I mixed and matched them, I could then check that, and then you'd see that I got 2 of them correct and 2 of them incorrect from here. So that's an example of a drag and drop as well. So hopefully that answers 2 questions in one. But as we go back, so this is now the questions I picked. I click Save. I've now picked 20 questions for that particular component. And then I'd want to make sure that if I was changing this number, that I went back in and I edited it and hand selected which ones I wanted to use or which ones I didn't, so that I didn't override and have the system repick questions for there. So those are kind of your different pieces. If I now save this quiz, which is the last part, I can update this because it had already saved. And then I can see this quiz. I can assign it to my class now that that option is showing up. And if I wanted to come back to it, I could always find this quiz in my library. And in this case, it would be at the top because it's what I just created. But you can always kind of pick your type of activity or type of thing and go down and click quizzes, and then it would pull up any quiz I've created from there. So just kind of an overall reminder as you're working, by creating a quiz, you're specifying that practice that eliminates the adaptive component. And we'll go in assignments on how you might be able to incorporate multiple concepts and still have adaptive practice in our next section. So maybe we'll take some questions at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot to pause. We have a question from Jesse, which I think might have come in actually when you were talking about the initial practice, adaptive practice. Asked how to determine how many questions students need to practice for one concept in order to master it.
So I think there's kind of two different answers to that. One is if you're creating a quiz, that is totally your call. You can make any number of questions for any of those concepts. You noticed in this particular quiz, if I open it up again, that I had 10, I think it was maybe 10 questions for one of them. If I go back into edit, you can always update this, but 10 questions for one concept and 20 questions for another, I can totally change those around, and that's your choice. For our practice tool at this point in time, the mastery is 10 questions right. And it's a goal that's set to really just encourage them to keep working as they go through that piece. So it's not something that you would necessarily get a chance to set in the adaptive practice. But that's one of those kind of advantages where that system is built to really allow students to try that next level and challenge them at the level that they're at, as opposed to kind of overwhelming them with a ton of questions that they're not kind of ready for at that point in time. And so that's the difference between the quiz that you can choose and you can set, if you want that mastery to be something other than 10, then I would say your quiz feature would be the way you'd want to do that.
Great, and we just had a question come in that you might actually be getting ready to address here in this next section. It's about exporting a quiz and using it with an LMS.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two different pieces for there. One, let's answer the quick export option, and then we're going to cover LMS later on in this piece. So if you're in this quiz, you can actually download that or pull embed code for that quiz and use it in other places, just like you would for practice on our site, as well as kind of your standard YouTube video. So that would be one way to export a quiz. You could assign it to a class within CK-12. And then when we get to LMS later on in this webinar, we'll cover kind of how you might export that piece for different LMS systems.
We had one more question here that said, sorry I'm late, a late joiner. I would like to know if I could incorporate several concepts into one quiz in order to prepare for a unit. And I know that you just discussed that, but did you briefly just want to, review that is an option and a few tips on how to do that?
Yeah, and so, back in this edit option right here, you can see that there are two different concepts that I included in this quiz. I included the matter, mass, and volume from physical science that we started with, and then I added a concept on cylinders, and I could go through and add a question set for any other concept that I wanted to. So you could make this, 5 or 6 or 10, kind of the concepts that you need to include within a quiz for a whole unit. So that might be a way that you could go from there.
Great. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section. And I hope that you all will keep these questions coming. These are great. The next one is going to be on assignments and reports, which I think is kind of the area a lot of these questions are moving into. So let me pull up my screen. And I'll hand it back to you, Katie.
Thanks. So we mentioned briefly how to quick assign a practice and other modalities for any CK-12 group just by clicking on that assign to class option on its page. But let's go into the groups feature to learn more about assignments with multiple concepts and the reports that you see on student progress. So what is CK-12 assignments and reports? And our groups tools allow you to kind of create that single or multi-concept assignment. And assignments are just that, something you want your students to complete. Reports allow you to see their progress for any assignment, but note that you won't see progress on unassigned concepts so that your report isn't cluttered with other subject areas or random sections they may have tried out at any point. So this next part, why should I use it? Creating assignments allows you to see how students are progressing. Assignments for other modalities are simply whether they access text or a video, got to play around in a sim sandbox, or answer a question for a Plix. For practice, assignments are either general 10 questions right goals based on student competency, or the specific questions requirements if you customized it into a quiz. And that last part that popped up, where do I get it? And so major modalities can be quick assigned to groups from their page, but assignments for practice can also be created from within groups, and we're going to go into that in a minute. And then all your reports are accessed through your corresponding class group on CK-12. So while they can do practice on the phone in the practice app, you're going to want to kind of view their reports and view their content and make those assignments and customizations on CK-12. So at this point in time, I'm going to share my screen again and switch back into our live site so you can see what that looks like. So let's say I go up to the top where you see groups. So you saw the quick assign from there. Let's use this grades option to help you kind of see a longer assignment. And one thing you should know if I click on assignments is that if I choose to make an assignment for one class, you'll see it show up in other groups. So you can choose to assign that across different concepts across different classes. So you don't have to recreate a whole assignment if you want to use it with multiple classes. So from here, I can create an assignment. And in this case, we could do this in the same way, where we pulled up matter, mass, and volume in physical science, and it added it to this assignment. And then I can pull up ones for volume here. And let's say we were doing rectangular prisms this time, and add that in. Now in this case, I've added those as two different parts of the same assignment, but I haven't customized those practices, so therefore they still have the adaptive component in our system. If I wanted to add a quiz to this assignment, I could click on that, and I could create a new quiz, or I could choose to include this quiz that I was using. Now, this might be a great way to say, spend some time mastering this concept, messing around with it, see how you can do stuff. And then at the end of the work you've done, I still want one quiz that allows me to kind of test across my class where I know everyone got the same questions, and maybe I pulled a subset of sample questions from those two concepts. When I'm done, I can save this, write a title, so assignment for AP webinar, if I could type, and save that. And then when I'm done, you'll see that assignment appear within my group. So now it's right here, and I can choose to assign this particular concept to my class. If I click assign, or I could even click on that down arrow right there, edit this assignment if I wanted to, or pick a particular due date that I wanted it to occur, or that I wanted students to aim to kind of finish it by. You'll notice that there are two concepts and one quiz attached to this assignment. So those two concepts are the two concepts that I pulled adaptive practice for, and then that quiz is that combined quiz that I created, or another quiz if you wanted to use that. So just know that helps you kind of tell which components are adaptive practice and which are your customized tailored pieces. Now, one thing I should note, if I went back to my groups page, you can create a group to kind of allow you to work with this. And so I have a bunch of groups here that I've already been using, but if I wanted to create a new group, if I wanted to assign practice, make sure that it stays on this class option where I can assign practice, because a study group doesn't have that feature, because it's really to allow people to work together and not have a teacher assigning work. So that's the quick way to kind of create a brand new group. But let's go back into Jumpstart and look at what our reports feature gives us as an information. So if I click on reports, and we just switch this, so if it's something that you've seen beforehand but you haven't seen recently, this might be useful for you to kind of look at. And the switch was to allow you to see your whole class vertically and then your most recent assignments up at the top. And you'll notice, like for the water cycle, it says there's two components in there. So in the last assignment we made, there were 3 different parts, 2 concepts and a quiz. And so this is saying there are 2 components to the water cycle, and it looks like all 3 of my students in this class have only done one of those 2 assignments. If I clicked on it, I could then see how they were doing and the parts that they did. So in this case, 2 people finished it, hit their goal of 10, correct, and then 1 person started the other one, but is only partway through to reaching that goal. If I wanted to see the specifics, I could click on that particular percentage, and it would bring up the full detailed report as you go in. So this has the information that pops up to the student when they finish. So they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing how far they are on their practice goal, the number they've gotten correct, their streak of correct answers, the time they've spent, and their skill level. So where that meter was in terms of saying you're close to maybe wanting a recommendation, or you're doing really well and we're bumping you to harder questions. You can go down and you can see that this particular person was given 5 different questions, 2 easy, and then maybe that bumped up to medium and hard, and said, okay, well, that's not doing so well, so maybe we'll bump you back from there. And then you can actually see the particular questions. So you can go in and say, okay, they answered this instead of that, and see the actual details for that piece. So this gives you all of the information. And this time spent, I think, is super useful as a teacher, because if a kid spent a minute and got 10 questions right, they're either, especially at higher level math, there's no way they're solving it, they're randomly guessing. And so that tells you that extra piece of information. If I went back to reports and clicked on a particular student and I wanted to see kind of their work itself, so let's look at this first one, I could then access any of the information by doing the same thing and clicking on the title for any concept, and it will bring up all of those details. So one kind of final thing about accessing reports and accessing information, if I went to my dashboard as a teacher, and this page just got redone recently, so I want to make sure to bring it up, you can see the subjects that I'm working with, and because Jumpstart is working across different areas, we have all those chosen. You can see different places I've recently viewed, so notice numerical expression and mass, matter, and volume. And then trending options, so what other teachers might be using as well, so that might help you pick some choices. But then this little groups thing says I have 5 groups with multiple members in them. And if I click on that, I can then go down and see what's happening. And this is kind of the new information that's popping up. But I could go in and see what's happening, saying, okay, there's a bunch of assignments. Q&A hasn't been started on there. I could add different pieces. And you could actually see and access kind of any information if I clicked on different components. And then it would jump me into that group with all those details. So maybe that answers some of your questions in terms of kind of how to see the report attached to it and how to maybe make an assessment that still contains the adaptive components, but then includes multiple concepts, as opposed to creating that in a quiz.
Yeah, that was a lot of information. So let's again open it up to some questions. We had a question come in, I think, kind of at the end of the last section, really, that was asking, when a teacher creates an assignment, does the adaptive part still work within an assignment? Meaning, students, do they need to answer all the questions if they answered a hard question?
Yeah, so in that particular case, if we looked back at the example that I just created, so let me go back in here to the actual page for groups. Oh, and that was the group that we were working with. So in Jumpstart, if I go to my assignments, that last assignment that I just created had multiple parts that were still adaptive. So if I look into here, notice it has the 2 concepts and the 1 quiz. So for those 2 concepts, it will be adaptive in that it will bump a kid up quickly to those harder questions, and they'll probably get their 10 relatively quickly, and then they can move on from there. A student who is doing poorly might get those recommendations and stay at that lower level of question to kind of meet them where they are and not frustrate them with questions that they're not really ready to answer. So in an assignment, you can create concepts with different parts that each still contain that adaptive practice. The quiz itself in here no longer creates the adaptive practice, and you're setting the number of questions that you want the students to answer, and you're setting maybe even the exact questions that you want to show up in there. So
great. Keep asking some questions here. Oh, we just got one. How do you calculate the skill level shown on the dashboard? What does 20% in your example of the water cycle mean?
So 20% in the water cycle example means that that person, if you noticed when we went into there, got 2 questions correct. So for our adaptive practice, because it's really encouraging them to kind of work at the level they're at and meet a reasonable goal, the goal is 10 correct. And so in this case, you'll notice that there are 2 correct questions and that therefore their 20% is done there. The difference with a quiz would be that you'd be getting a percentage based on the number correct out of the fixed number that you set for your quiz. So that goal is different in a quiz in that you've chosen a set number and you're getting a percentage out of that, where here it's 20% towards the goal of 10 correct.
We have another question about grade passback, and our poll earlier showed that actually quite a bit of our viewers are using Canvas, Edmodo, Google, some of those tools. So can you take a few minutes and talk to them about our integration with learning management systems?
Sure, and kind of the best way, especially for some of you that aren't using any, if your school chooses to use them in the future, you can find out all the information you need either in our Help Center or at the bottom of our page. You can go to this lovely little Tools and Apps page. And that brings up the tools and apps that we've integrated with. So the first two here, you'll see kind of the third one is that practice app we were discussing. And the first two are our Flexbook and our Physics Sims app. And those are really so that you can access that material offline. So that if you're working with a Flexbook and you have spotty internet, you could open that up and use that. And same with the physics simulation. The practice app, because it has that adaptive component, still you're working kind of online at that point, but you can use a phone. Now, LMS for a number of different options. Google Classroom is at this point a share option. So if you're sending assignments to Google Classroom, in Google Classroom, you can post an announcement, post a question, or make an assignment in Google Classroom. To see the reports within CK-12, you will need to also assign that in a CK-12 group. So just know that at this point in time, for Google Classroom, you're going to want to see your reports and work within CK-12. Edmodo has math and science practice, and for that, we do have grade passback. So you can actually pull up practice in Edmodo and see how your students are doing in Edmodo. So you don't have to jump back and forth kind of in between those two servers. Similarly, we just released integration with Schoology, and that's pretty similar to Canvas in that you have grade passback. So if you create practice or quiz assignments in Schoology or Canvas, you will be able to see those reports within that program and maintain that with the rest of your grades. In addition, for those ones, you can assign other modalities such as a section in a book or a video. The next couple, so Blackboard contains content from CK-12 in their open Blackboard area. So it used to be called Explore. So you can find some content there. Similarly, Nearpod partnered with us and created some lessons with CK-12. And then you'll see kind of extensions where you can click into CK-12 if you have Chrome or a Windows 8 app, which is great if you have a bunch of school computers and you want students to quickly access that. And then Clever is a single sign-on option along with ClassLink. So if you're using those, you can use that same sign-in from there. So for these ones, because they're super specific, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of wrap up the core content for this webinar, and then feel free to stay on. And if you have questions about finding CK-12 in any of these LMS systems, we can definitely answer that, and I can demo any one of those specifically.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great plan. Yeah, so I will give some important information here before we wrap up. And then, like she said, stay on, and we will stay on as long as we need to answer every individual question. But first of all, I want to thank Katie so much for that wonderful presentation. And I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. I want to give you guys some words of encouragement that you just need to go for it. You know, sign up, sign in, download the free apps, explore the practice tool as well as all of our content, and experiment with the customization process. As you guys know, because you're awesome educators, there's no better way to learn than to jump in and try it out. I also want to let you know that we have more webinars coming up just like this. The next one that we have scheduled is an Everything CK-12 webinar at the end of the month. And this is going to get you an overview of CK-12's full suite of offerings, including our Flexbook, simulations, interactives, and other modalities that we didn't really talk about today since it was on adaptive practice. If you're somebody who's wanting to dive in specifically to our Flexbooks and learn about finding a textbook replacement and customizing it to fit your needs, join us in December for Customizing Curriculum with CK-12 Flexbooks. You can register for any of our upcoming webinars on the CK12.org webinars page. And then I also want to let you know about CK-12's Jumpstart page. This past summer, we ran a 6-week program that took the major components of CK-12 and went in depth week by week. The Jumpstart page has all of our archived videos, it has transcripts, it has lists of participants who might be in a city or state near you. It is an awesome page of resources for educators, so please go check that out. And then another great way to continue the conversation or to network with other CK-12 users, or even to get support from the CK-12 staff, is to join a CK-12 cafe. These are forums, and from our homepage, you can join the cafe and see what forums we have for students and for educators. I would recommend that you join the Jumpstart for Educators Cafe, and then keep checking back because we're adding more state-specific forums for educators. For us today, we really encourage you to answer a short survey, and it is short. It's like 5 or 6 questions that would give us a little feedback on the content and presentation of today's webinar. We are always looking to improve your experience. And so the link to the Google form is on the screen. Hopefully somebody can message it out in the chat window, and then we'll send it to you in the follow-up email as well. But if you have just like 2 minutes, please let us know how we did today so we can help prepare for next time. And then again, just thank you so much for joining us. And I want to assure you that you will be supported by our team at CK-12. We're happy to help you in any way. The best way to reach Katie or anybody else on our team is to email support@ck12.org, or again, reach out on one of our cafes. And we will get right back with you and help answer any of your questions. We're also available on all the social networks. If you're into the social networking, you can find us at CK12 Foundation, and tell all of your followers that you're joining some of our professional development webinars. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up? I think we've had some other questions come in. So we're going to let Katie handle any individual questions for the people who want to stay on, and to the rest of you, thanks for joining us. Great. So Katie, if you want to share your screen again, let's tackle a few of these Q&As that came in while I was talking. The first one that came in was, is Canvas only available for schools and districts? Does it work for homeschooling families?
So the answer to that question is it is actually available for schools and districts as well as for homeschooling families. There is a free version of Canvas, so I would check in with Canvas on kind of downloading that piece and having access to Canvas as a whole. But I know that there's a free version, so you should be able to do that from that side. When you do, let's go back to kind of our CK-12 homepage for a second, and down to those tools and apps. And if you look at Canvas in particular, so you can see kind of the LTI application registration. And what this will do is it will give you what's called a key and secret for Canvas, and the same is true for Schoology. So if you're interested in using CK-12 in Canvas or Schoology, you need 2 different codes to do so. And so you just need to fill this out, and in terms of your name of school or district, just write that you're homeschooling. If you are a school or district, make sure that you have, if possible, your IT administrator do this so that you have one clean key for the whole school, and kids are all, if they're using CK-12 with different classes, they all have the same kind of broad umbrella for what they're doing. So I would definitely work with Canvas to get yourself set up on that end, and then when you're done, fill out this LTI application registration for Canvas, and we'll get you the information you need to then pull it up within there. And once you're in there, if I go to my Canvas option for a second, you'll see in any courses. So let's go into this one for a second. And once you've added it in, see if it will load from there. I can create an assignment. And then once it's added, all I need to do at the bottom of the assignment is choose an external tool. So let's create a new assignment. And then go down here. And where it says here, I'm going to choose external tool, and then I can search CK12.org and find, and it will pull up the resources that are available from there. One other thing about this is that you can search both in Schoology and in Canvas for any of our core content, but if you've created or customized your own content, or you're using other user content, just make sure to add it to your library on CK-12, and then you can pull up all that information. So now you can see the demo quiz that we created today, and you can add that into Canvas or Schoology. So that's it for Canvas from this piece. I'm just going to cancel this out. I know we had a question about seeing this in Schoology, so let's go to there for a second. So similarly, for Schoology, from home, you're going to want to add CK-12 as an app. So in your App Center, you can add CK-12. And right here, it's actually right up at the top, so it's pretty simple to add. And you're going to want to install it based on a course. So this is the free basic version. If you have the enterprise version, there are slightly different ways to go about doing that. And I'll touch on that in a second. But once I've installed it in that course, so I've created a course and then I install it in there, I can go to my course. And then in materials, I'm going to just add materials from CK-12 because that app's in there. And I have the same option to search for materials. So I could pull up, let's say we were talking, click that little search thing, law of reflection. It would pull up those options. And you can see here, we'll do it in physics. So there's an example. There's one particular read that I could assign to my students. There's a couple of videos, some assessments, and a real world application. So in addition to practice, which will give the grade pass back, the other options will tell you if a student has accessed it from in there. And then you would create your assignment from that. So let's say I added this piece, and then I could go and continue to kind of create that assignment within Schoology. So hopefully that gave you a brief idea on how to do that. Make sure you're accessing the LTI application and you get the key to integrate it first, because I did have to go in under the home part and add it as an app to that course. If I was looking at that, I'm going to go back for 1 second. Let me just go back to CK-12. I know Lindsay kind of mentioned Jumpstart is a great place for help, and I could go into help in general and do that, kind of look at all of our different options. So down here for Schoology, and how to create assignments, you can log in and notice kind of this is the assignment piece, but know that there's 2 different versions. So if I was going to actually go to kind of a different option, there is an enterprise version as well. And so make sure that for the adding that app in, that you're looking at the correct one, and you can link back and forth to kind of show you those different pieces. So that would be Schoology. And does it only add quizzes? Could I add Flexbooks on Canvas? So that's actually a really good question. So similar to Schoology, where I just added a read, in Canvas, you can add particular sections, but not a whole Flexbook, which makes sense because as a teacher, I'm not going to assign my entire pre-calculus textbook to my class. I'm going to assign section 3.2 to my class. And so once again, if I'm looking at that, I could pull up a concept such as, let's say I taught pre-calc, so maybe domain and range in here. So search, or I could scroll down and use the same browse options that we have, just like on our homepage that you saw there a minute ago. But if I was going to do that, you'll see here that I could add the read that goes with that. And then if I had customized that, or I'd maybe customized a book that was someone else's, just make sure to add the specific reads to your library if you were using one that's not specifically CK-12. So hopefully that answers that piece.
Okay, well, we'll give it just a few more seconds. This is last call for any questions that you might have today about adaptive practice. And since we don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and say goodbye to you all. And you can access this webinar. If there's any pieces that you missed, you can access it tomorrow. We'll have it on the webinar's site on demand for you to review any of this information, and reach out to us if we can answer any other questions. Thanks so much.